Here's Malcolm Gladwell with Jeff Tweedy.
Can I start with this tantalizing little anecdote you tell in your book that when your dad got mad, he would go into the basement and write poems? And all I could think of is, this is the Jeff Tweedy origin story.
Pretty much. I think so, yeah.
Was your father musical?
My father was a frustrated entertainer. He got my mom pregnant in high school, and they dropped out, and he got a job on the railroad. And I think his whole life, I think that he wished that he had had an opportunity to be on stage somehow. But he was not particularly musical. But he was entertaining, that's for sure. But he aspired to be musical. He liked to sing. He drank a lot, and he got up at every wedding and embarrassed us terribly, humiliated us in lots of cases. Yeah. but
were his poems, were they any good?
Yeah, no, my dad was brilliant. They weren't. I don't think that they were good in like a Robert Frost way, or but they might have been good in a Jimmy Stewart kind of way, or Ogden Nash maybe at the high end of his aspirations. But he wouldn't have had any of those references other than Jimmy Stewart. So, but he did. He made unrequited forays into indulging his musical side many times. Like he bought an organ from the mall that the salesman claimed would teach him how to play, and he would just sit there and watch the lights flash as it would play itself and drink a beer. It was I have a lot of memories of that.
But he wrote the poems when you said when he was angry.
That was my memory of them. Yeah. And I sadly, a couple of summers ago when he passed away, we emptied out the house the only house I'd ever lived in when, like my parents bought one and my mom was pregnant with me. And I found a lot of his homework from when he taught himself, or basically learned computing early on, math homework and stuff like that. But I didn't find any of the notebooks that had any of the poems. So I suspect that he just got it off his chest and then threw them away.
Yeah, I just love these kinds of generational parallels. Mm-hmm. It's almost like if you were on the couch, I would say you're like Tweedy 2.0. You're like the do-over, the frustrated musician who's writing these essentially lyrics of some sort, and then you've come along and you've turned it into an art.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are tons of parallels that it's disturbing as you get older how much you start to look like your parents and look like exactly like my dad. And, I think he suffered from a lot of the same mood disorders that I've dealt with in my life, but he clumsily, but somehow, as far as employment goes and as far as like not having worsening consequences, which would be typical of alcoholism, he managed to medicate himself clumsily for his entire life, for anxiety. I'm sure he had anxiety and depression, and he did instinctively seem to have turned to some of the same things that have provided some solace for me that weren't unhealthy, like getting things off his chest. And, I was indulged a lot, perhaps because I was a do-over.
When did you write your first song? Do you remember?
The first song I remember writing, and I'm pretty sure that there were songs before this, but the first song I remember writing was a song called Your Little World. And it was about a girl and her not having enough room in her world for me. And
how old are you when you're writing?
I was maybe 13, 14.
You don't remember it, do you?
Your little world's much too small Oh, I ain't got no room at all. It's like, yeah, I was like, I remember it. I could play it. Actually, one of the weird things is that this local musician who went by the name Joe Camel, a band Joe Camel and the Caucasians, they actually recorded that song and made a single out of it.
Oh, really?
It exists. Yeah. Yeah. Because I was this kid that hung out with all, like, at the record stores and hung out at the, with around other musicians when I could get near them. And I would always, I write songs. And this guy in this band, Joe Camel, said, "Hey, let me hear one of your songs." And I went over to his house and I played him this song. He said, "Oh, that's great. I'm going to record it. We're going to go record this song." And he did.
That's fantastic. When do you think you wrote your first good song?
Well, I honestly don't think that one was terrible. I think it's not great, but it was good enough for somebody else to want, see some potential in it. The first song I liked that I wrote was probably Screen Door on the first Uncle Tupelo record. Mm-hmm. That's the first one where I felt like I had said something that felt true to me and that I didn't necessarily have anybody else's song to convey that idea. I always look at it like I'm trying to make songs and new song for me to sing that someone hasn't already written. So that one was the first one that felt like that.
How old are you when you write that song?
16, maybe.
Oh, I see.
16, 17.
Yeah. So pretty. It's funny. I have heard musicians of various kinds answer that question over the years, and there's a whole set of them who, 10 years pass between the first song they write and the first one they like.
Yeah.
but you have a much less ambivalent relationship to your early songwriting.
One of the things I feel like I've had some shame about in my life is how shamelessly I love stuff that I make. Mm-hmm. And I think over time I've really made peace with it because I think that that's kind of beautiful, and it's kind of one of the things that's allowed me to grow. I don't tend to keep liking things that I've made. I tend to get pretty dissatisfied with them over time, but initially even when I figure out how to play something on the guitar that someone else has done, I feel like I invented it. I have this really, sort of delusional relationship with the joy that I take from making something, and I think that really comes naturally. So a lot of times, my favorite song is always the one I'm working on. Almost invariably, I was like, "Wow, this is really great," and and it dissipates over time. But I've always felt like that.
Does that make you a bad judge of your own songwriting?
I think it does, and that's part of the reason that I've had to learn a lot of different ways to get out of get my ego out of the way, allow things to gestate for a lot longer, or put them away and forget about them, so that I can come back to them with a little bit more objectivity. But in general, I think it's just kind of the spirit of it is what comes across a lot of times, and that in a lot of cases is enough, because not every song has to be the greatest song that's ever been written, but it sure helps if you feel like it is at the moment, in the moment, Yeah.
You describe in this lovely book you've just done, How to Write One Song. Yeah. You describe a series of exercises, songwriting exercises, and also describe a kind of what a songwriting day should look like. And I was curious, before we go into that, how long did you, if that's the pattern of songwriting you practice now, how long have you been doing it that way? Did you always have this kind of very structured way about writing music? No,
I think that as I've gotten older, I think one of the things I've really had to learn how to do is provide myself structure, because I work in a profession that doesn't have a lot of structure outside of touring, which is extremely structured and routine, But being home has always been a little bit dangerous for me in terms of my mental health, though the routine has been something I've had to learn and has helped me quite a bit. That being said, I don't remember a time where I haven't felt like a kind of a nagging sense all day that I should be making something, or that I should be learning something, or I should be reading something, or I should be listening to something. And that tends to provide a lot of momentum to my days. This ugly feeling that I'm avoiding almost all the time is that I don't want to get to the end of the day and feel like I didn't learn anything, or didn't make something, or just didn't participate in my life in the ways that I've found to be the most enjoyable and helpful to me.
You described this ideal songwriting day in the book. When was the last ideal songwriting day you had, and what did it look like?
It's been a while. I think the ideal day, the last one I might have had, would have been during the process of making the album I just released, Love is the King, where, around 8 o'clock at night or something, I would have started working on a song that I was thinking about recording the next day. I would have, worked on it and played around with it, maybe made a little demo of it on my phone until like maybe midnight, gone to sleep, woke up, probably would have finished the lyrics early in the morning, because they tend to kind of untangle themselves in my sleep a lot of times. And I like to write even before I get out of bed, where I feel like I'm still sort of, the judgment side of me is still sleeping or something, Then I would have gotten up and come to the studio, maybe worked on that song for a little while in the studio, had lunch, maybe taken a nap, would have gotten up from the nap, finished the song, maybe invited my younger son over to sing a harmony vocal on it. Common practice in that moment when I'm asking someone else like Sammy to sing on something would be to really focus on the lyrics and make sure they're where I want them to be. So I would have done some revisions on that, maybe until around 5 or 6, and have a rough mix to take home and have some dinner and listen to records generally until I get excited about trying to make something to beat something I just heard. Some sort of like trying to activate some competitive side of my brain, and then start the whole process over with maybe seeing if I could, come up with another song for the next day.
So in your ideal world, is it a song from start to finish in that one day, or is it that you have little bits and pieces already there that you're going back and finding and playing with?
I can do a song start to finish in one day, but typically there are little pieces of raw material that have been accumulated. Yeah, I think one of the things I might do at 8 o'clock, say the beginning of the day I just described, would be to go through my phone and find a musical idea that I'm excited by, that, I don't know, just catches me enough unaware to start dreaming about it and start like fantasizing about where it could go or what it could sound like.
Do you have your phone with you right now? Can you play us a musical idea off the phone?
Sure. Let's see. Well, this one sounds maybe a little bit more finished than normal. The tunnel at the end of the light.
So has that little bit been turned into a song yet, or is it just out there waiting? It's waiting.
It's waiting. I mean, there's stuff that's maybe, I don't even know what this is. Just some chords I thought were pretty. But yeah, there are dozens, or not dozens, there's probably literally hundreds of those things in my phone. When they stack up a little bit, I usually transfer some to the computer here at the loft, so they're at least in a couple places. So.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated by this process. How long might a little bit linger on your phone or in your archive before you use it? Is there stuff? And if we went into you said sometimes you download them at the loft. How far back would we have stuff there from 10 years ago you've never used?
Yeah, I mean, probably. There are, I used to do it on cassettes, and basically I used to just leave a cassette in a dictaphone, old style, like what a steno would have used, or someone in an secretary pool. And I would just leave it on the coffee table and until it filled up, and then I'd put another cassette in. And there are dozens of those cassettes, and like on the Suki Ray album that I made under the name Tweedy, there's a song on there that I finished after 14 years, I think.
What song was it?
It's called I'll Sing It.
Uh-huh. Was there a little snippet of it that was the original snippet?
It's actually in the track. I actually just played
really?
over the cassette version. Yeah.
Oh, that's...
And then I think that ended up on the Summer Teeth box set that we just put out, because it was written around the same time as Summer Teeth.
Yeah. When you go back and find a little snippet like that, do you remember when you created the snippet, or is that gone?
It depends. A lot of times I don't remember at all. I have no recollection at all of a lot of times I don't even remember the tuning, and I have to like sit and figure out, because I use a lot of different tunings, and I really hate it when I don't bother to tune the guitar to a standard pitch, because then it makes it even harder to figure out what tuning I'm in and stuff like that. So a lot of times it's completely gone wherever it happened, which is I love it when that happens, even though it can be frustrating trying to relearn it. But then there are times where I absolutely have a distinct memory of where I was and what was happening. And a lot of times that's because there are other ambient elements that made their way onto the recording. Like, say, backstage, and somebody in Wilco walks through and says something, and I can viscerally feel that room, and I'll know even what city it was in a lot of cases. Sometimes when I'm doing it in hotel rooms in Europe and you have the windows open, whenever we're fortunate enough to find a hotel that has windows that open, you hear like people eating at the cafes or something like that. Those are always really kind of special recordings that a lot of times mean a lot to me even without them being finished.
Yeah. We did an interview with Norah Jones a while back now, and she was talking about how she did her song Wintertime with you, and she was talking about this very process, that she had some scraps of little bits and pieces, and you had bits and pieces, and you kind of put it together to create a really beautiful song. Can you walk us through that little case study of this time with a twist, with another person involved, but seems like both of you were doing the work of creativity in the same way. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, Norah Jones doesn't need me to help her write a song, for sure, but we admire each other, so there's already a kind of a base level of camaraderie or something, you know. But I haven't found many people that I've worked with to have just wildly different approaches to it. Everybody seems to have sort of the core process is sort of similar. You basically start with something that is nothing, that feels like it could be something. And then you basically surrender this idea that you can't do that. You can't make something out of nothing, and and you do it. And it's really the most important part is just letting go of the idea that it can't happen, I think. And with someone else, it requires a lot of waiting until you both have, both people have to feel comfortable and supported enough and trusting enough to kind of throw out ideas until, a light bulb goes off in two heads at once. It's a little bit more foolproof in a way, because you have that consensus of universality for two people as opposed to like just trying to imagine that everybody will like something you like.
You've done an unusual amount of collaboration with other artists. You write for Mavis Staples. You did those beautiful Mermaid Avenue albums with Billy Bragg that are among my favorites. When you're writing with another person in mind, does it change the way you write a song?
Yeah, I think it does. I honestly think that that is the thing that I am most comfortable doing. I think it's the thing I truly aspire to do more than almost any other thing that I get to do. I always pictured myself being a person that would write songs for other people to sing. In Uncle Tupelo, I wanted my songs to be sung by Jay because he had this magnificent, like rich, authoritative voice, and I had this squeaky, voice that I didn't feel like was quite my own even at the time. I was struggling to find it. As much as I felt great when I sang, I just loved the idea of writing the song more than the idea of singing it. And I still think that that's where my most natural abilities lie, is in helping somebody with their song, like working with Nora, or finding something for someone to sing like Mavis. I don't look at it as like I'm putting words in her mouth. I feel like I'm just kind of helping find something that she feels comfortable singing that makes sense for her to sing. Mm-hmm. Same thing with the Woody Guthrie lyrics. That was even more along the lines of what I feel I have the strongest sense about as being something that comes naturally to me, because those lyrics were sacrosanct. They're like, you're not gonna mess with them. They're there. You don't even need to worry about whether or not they're good enough. They're important. For people that don't know, there were all these lyrics that Woody Guthrie left behind that the music was never documented, or he never really made any music for. There's all these archival lyrics and writing that we took and made songs out of. And with those, I would just sit and read them over and over and over again until the meter would emerge, and then next there would be a melody that would emerge. And in a lot of cases with Woody Guthrie lyrics, you read it and all of a sudden a Carter Family song emerges, because that's what he was actually writing his lyrics to, was someone else's song. Mm-hmm. I did the same thing with a bunch of lyrics for Bob Dylan that never came out, because I wasn't able to be a part of that process for that record that they did a couple years ago, where they had a bunch of lyrics that Dylan had written. It's like Elvis Costello was a part of it, and some of the Mumford and Sons. But anyway, T-Bone had asked me if I could do it, and I got all these lyrics, and then my wife started treatment for cancer, so I couldn't go to L.A. for the amount of time that they wanted me to. But I did the same thing with those lyrics. I wrote and recorded a whole record in a weekend.
Do you find it sort of freeing to not have to do it in your own, with your own voice in mind?
Yeah, I think that I just struggle with allowing myself to comment on certain things that I don't feel like I have the authoritative weight to weigh in on, for in terms of like Mavis or something like that, or the things that I feel like Mavis has a voice of righteousness, of some broader scope in a historical importance and place. There's just a weight to it that I feel very privileged to have been able to write for. Mm-hmm. But a lot of those things are not going to make as much sense coming out of my mouth. It just doesn't feel right for a lot of social reasons, I think.
Mm-hmm. What's the right word to describe your attitude towards your own voice? Are you self-conscious about it?
No,
You made that comment about Tupelo and how you preferred if...
No, I feel like I've gotten way better as a singer, and I've worked really hard to get better over a lot of time. And I enjoy my voice, my singing voice, quite a bit. I actually do like listening to myself sing now. When I find things that I want to sing, in a lot of cases, I feel like I'm the only person that could sing it the way I want to hear it. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I'm oblivious to the fact that my voice isn't technically great in the, by the normal criteria of American Idol or The Voice or, whatever, but all my favorite singers are like that. Almost all my favorite singers have non-traditional voices that have become communicative. It's like where they trade virtuosity or technique or whatever for sincerity or sentiment and conviction. And I feel like I found that in my voice over time, and I'm very, very proud of the idea that I still work at getting better and try and sing in tune, but I'm much more concerned with making the words feel the way I want them to feel. Mm-hmm. My speaking voice, on the other hand, is awful. I will never listen to the book that I just read or this interview.
Sorry to hear that.
I'm sorry. I might listen to you do another interview with someone else,
but not. So on this point, in the book, you talk about stealing, which you're being a little bit mischievous because you don't really mean stealing, but you're talking about being open to influence, essentially. So give me an example of another artist whose work you find lots of stuff to borrow from and be inspired by. And I'm just curious, does it come from everywhere, or are there predictable places where you go to find ideas?
Well, the thing I'm describing in the book is just based on this belief that you can't really copyright a group of chords. What I'm describing in the book is basically me saying, well, I'm going to look for a song that I think has a bunch of cool chords in it, and I'm going to learn how to play it, and then I'm going to take it and make it into something that no one would hear that song in it anymore. But it's basically like just when you're a little bit stuck, just realizing that the world is full of these, sort of naturally occurring shapes that you can appropriate. I don't look at them as being particularly ownable by anybody, and especially if I don't sing the same type of song or put the same type of melody over it or even have the same rhythm, or there are many ways to describe it, but it's such a liberating thing to do, to just go, oh, I'll just take these chords and start there, because I haven't been able to come up with anything all day. That being said, there are just tons and tons of artists, new and old, every day of my life that I encounter. And to me, you have to work to not encounter art that inspires you. I think, and I think that does overwhelm people. I think sometimes some people do get to a certain point where they want to hide from influence or hide from the feeling that they're being challenged by other artists. But I look at it like most of the time I get that way too. I can feel overwhelmed sometimes, but more often than not, I feel really invigorated by the fact that if I go looking, it won't take me long at all to find something that shows me where the bar is that I should be aiming for.
What's an example of a song you listened to recently that triggered all kinds of reactions and inspirations in you?
Kate LeBon writes a lot of music that makes me feel that way. She's just the first person that popped into my mind. She's an artist that has this undeniable Kate LeBon-ness about what she does, and that's hard to find. I think she has a very specific angle that she comes at what she does, and nobody else knows that precise angle, I think. The song Meet the Man, I Wanted to Meet the Man, I think that's the name of it. I think it's the last song on her most recent record. It has all of these twists and turns that are unpredictable, and I don't know.
When you listen to that song, can you turn off the part of your brain that wants to kind of learn from it, use it, employ it in some way, and just enjoy it? Or is that part of the brain always on?
Well, that is how I enjoy it. I think that is part of how I enjoy it. I think I enjoy it first and foremost the way I have enjoyed music since I was a little kid, before I played any music or wrote any music. I'm just attracted to sound and excited by records, and I don't think that that's any different. But I don't feel burdened by the knowledge that I have now, and I think it just adds this insight. Like, oh wow, I can kind of tell what reverb is going on there. But that being said, the things that I tend to enjoy the most are the things that I have zero idea how they came to be.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things I listen to, like have more repeated listenings, tend to be like some hip hop records and things that are outside of my skill set and then there are times where I crave comfort food, where I just want to hear a simple country song played on an acoustic guitar, and I have a very, very firm grasp on how that comes to be, but it doesn't diminish its importance in my life,
Is there an artist, a contemporary of yours, whose career you would have loved to have?
No, I honestly, I've thought about that a lot. I have moments where I have professional jealousy. I think it'd be impossible not to have these moments, especially if you're somewhat competitive like I am. I think it's like, why is everybody writing about this guy now? I was like, like like I'm not ashamed to admit I have it's not the end of the world to admit you have petty feelings, but honestly, I don't think so, because when I take a step back, the prevailing emotion is gratitude. I mean, this is nothing like I would have been ever been able to imagine for myself.
Mm-hmm.
30 years in from my first time probably playing on a stage or, getting in front of people.
It would be really fun if we put together a bunch of the stuff we've been talking about in a song. Like, is there a song that you could play and break down for us, where you talk about all the little pieces that brought it together, how the song was created, the little bits of influence, if you remember them? Is there one that's that fresh in your memory that you could do that? A little mini masterclass?
Let me think. I have a guitar here. So that's the G chord I always play when I pick up a guitar. It's an inadvertence.
The invariant G, the Tweedy G.
Yeah. It's pretty. It's just my grounding. Well, there's a song on the new record called Opaline, where I was writing it this summer or this spring when there was so much going on in the world, and our relationships with our police departments were being investigated and talked about a lot. So I'm not a person that's ever had that feeling. I've never really been a fan of police, because I've always felt like police had a lot more to do with their mentality, had a lot more to do with the people that made fun of me in school and were more jockey, and it's just a general atmosphere around police that I've not enjoyed. But I've not had this experience that a lot of minorities have had with police in this country, and I'm aware of that. But I was trying to put myself into that headspace of living with that fear. So those were the lyrics that I was playing around with. Is like, I hear the police outside my window. I can hear them talking on their radios. So that's like just one little chunk of the song. That was a melody that I had without any words.
Did you write that chunk first?
Yeah, I did. We had a golden orb weaver spider in our garden this spring that I named Opaline for some reason, just because it just seemed like a cool name. I had an Aunt Opal, and so I just start singing to her. That's just writing a country song. It's just trying to figure out a way to get to the line, reality's hard to see when you got no love at all. Because one of the things that has been on my mind a lot these last few years, or for a while now, is how do you get to the point where reality doesn't matter? And it obviously is very negotiable for a lot of people in our information climate that we can shop for a reality that we trust and believe, and there isn't a shared consensus a lot of times, which is really maddening and strange to witness. We don't even have the same agreed upon fictions anymore, so it's really troubling. And my theory is that must be a lot easier to do when people have been isolated from a lot of their feelings of being cared for or having affection and warmth in their life.
Mm-hmm. So you have in this song, you have that opening image of the kid in bed, head under the pillow, and hearing the cops outside and worrying. And then you have Opaline.
Yeah.
And then you also have the other interesting element is it's very plainly a country song, but we're not in country territory, are we?
Well, I mean, country territory is pretty vast, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's to me, where country music fails is when it tries to adhere to the tropes of country music and becomes like Civil War reenactment or something. It's it's not about what's happening. And this is a weird song for me to pick, but I'm going to stick with it now because we're in it. But this is a little bit of a pastiche to where I got all of these elements to make sense to me and feel good to me. There's a story that runs through it that feels apprehendable to me, So I had that, and that's probably what I put in my phone first.
Yeah.
Aside from the initial chord progression that I might have hummed over, that was like the first document of this song. And then I was out driving my car on a toll road right after that, and there was a hearse on a toll road outside Chicago. And this literally happened. And I went through a toll next to a hearse, and as I went through the toll, I looked back, and the hearse was stuck at the toll. Like, it didn't have any money or whatever, but as I kept driving, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, and it just kept not being let through the toll. And I just felt like I'd been hit over the head with one of the most striking metaphors I'd ever encountered in the real world. Like what is purgatory? I don't know. Like, it's just one of the craziest things. And so I actually wrote this in the car into my phone. I've just voice memoed into my phone.
Wait, dumb question, but you had the hearse experience and you have these two little bits that you've already done. Why do you think the hearse experience belongs to this song and not any number of other things that you have stashed away for future reference? How do you know it belongs here?
It's just what was in my mind. So I don't really think of things as accidents that I need to really investigate, and it sang well to this melody before I could even make a decision about where it should go. Do you know what I mean? It's like that song was already in my mind. I'd been working on it. Yeah. So those are the patterns that you walk around with when you have a song in your head. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy having a song in my head, because then everything that happens to me is da 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 da. Like everything fits in that melody. It makes some order out of the world, I suppose.
So those lyrics that you just sang for me, is that exactly as you composed them in the car, or would you fiddle with them later?
No, that's exactly as I composed them in the car.
And did you compose them in the car like off the cuff, or were you playing with it in your mind before you recorded it?
I played with it in my mind a little bit before I decided that I should document it before I get home.
Yeah. And again, I'm sorry, I'm totally, I can't get over this. This is so much fun. Do you pull over, or do you keep driving and you're singing into your phone?
Well, I mean, not to get too technical, but I pressed a button on my phone that allowed me to record it without having to take my eyes off the road.
No, I wasn't suggesting you were an unsafe driver, but I was suggesting I was imagining there was a scenario where you're so caught up in this that you're like, I got to focus, and you're like pull into the the IHOP parking lot, but no, you're just driving merrily down the road, singing this into your phone.
Yeah.
I love also that 99% of humanity sees the hers, either doesn't see the hers or sees the hers and doesn't immediately understand the perfection of that metaphor.
Well,
I feel like you're attuned. You are attuned to these things.
Thank you. I think we all should be. I mean, we're walking around and there's no failed experiment if you're paying attention to the world. I think we get tired. I think we get overwhelmed, like I was saying before, with like inspiration or influence and things like that. We're not always receptive, and we don't always have the energy, or a lot of us have a lot of concerns all the time about a lot of other things that would require more mental energy than we have, and that tends to crowd out a lot of, paying attention to the strangeness of the world, or I don't feel like I'm doing anything super unique in that regard. I just think that I am aware that my brain wants to make sense of stuff, and I give it an opportunity to make sense of stuff, or actively participate in the fact that it does that. I think all of our brains do that. All of our brains would much prefer to find some reason for something to be the way it is than to try and accept and understand ambiguity and randomness and things like that. So we're designed to do that. And then sometimes it hits you over the head because it is just too perfect and beautiful, like a hearse being stuck at a toll booth plaza.
Wait, you're not done. We're not done. Keep going.
Well, the thing, so there's a verse and verse, or verse and chorus, verse and a chorus. And then by that time, I think I had already recorded it, and I had recorded the song, but to me, it was kind of like I had become the guy that was hiding from the cops, that got killed, that got murdered by cops, that ended up on the highway in a hearse, not having the change, even the money to go through a toll, comically dark, even in my demise, still completely just devoid of any luck whatsoever. Which is a country trope in a way, just like the beautiful loser. But still singing. This is a theme on the record, actually, is still singing from beyond the grave to this woman who basically took everything away, in his opinion or his feeling, but basically saying, I'm still going to be in that air that you breathe. I'm still going to be. I can't have what I want, but I can still imagine that you are going to think about me from time to time. And it's a sad, pathetic notion that a lot of weak men have, and I've had in my life, and is that you'll miss me when I'm gone. And I think it's more often than not wishful thinking.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jeff. I think that's a lovely way to wrap things up.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.